Hey everyone, this is Jay, also known as jaynemesis from eToro, and this is our weekly update for week 35 of 2018. Our top news this week, EOS has broken yet more transaction records. This time EOS breached over 25,000 transactions within a single hour, multiple times during the same day. I haven't checked since, but I would imagine that it's pretty likely that EOS is actually above that, has been above that several times since then as well. So this wasn't any sort of stress test or anything. This is just people using apps built on EOS. So the most popular apps that have really been driving this is ETHBet and ETHDice, which moved over to EOS and is called EOS Dice and EOS Bet. And also some of the games similar to something that I've mentioned on eToro before a couple of times, like EOS Wizards and EOS Knights. So these are basically like collectible games where you collect items and stuff and customize a character. And you can even do battle with it. It's kind of like something like Pokemon cards or Magic the Gathering, but as a digital version. So this is obviously really good news for EOS, and yet again is proving just how scalable it is and how useful it is. It has presented a few problems, though, since basically any capacity by the network that isn't being paid for by someone is open for anyone to use. They've had to actually cut back on some of the people that have been using that kind of free resource, that extra resource that's within the EOS network. So there's been a spam attack taking place on the EOS blockchain pretty much since it started. And they've basically now kind of grey listed it so it doesn't get as much access to those extra spare resources because it threatens making those other apps maybe a little bit slower. But it's not really a major problem at the moment, and I'm not really concerned by it. Next up, Square have had a patent approved for their payment network based on cryptocurrency. So I think the idea here for Square is that they want to create a BitPay style payment service that also works on their current Square payment network. This is obviously really, really, really big news for crypto because Square is used in an awful lot of places and it's growing still. And we've seen the growth that they've had in the Cash App recently, which is where people are going on there and buying cryptocurrency. They also do a bunch of other stuff on the app, but the cryptocurrency stuff is what's been in the headlines recently. And pretty much as soon as I saw that move, I figured out what was happening, which is that Square is basically trying to prepare for a two-sided marketplace, whereby actually they don't have to go and sell cryptocurrency if someone pays in it and the other person wants to receive US dollars, because there are already people using their other app, the Square Cash App, that are willing to buy that cryptocurrency. They're building their own market, their own exchange, effectively. This is obviously great for them because it means that they don't have to go and buy and sell from the rest of the market and pay larger fees, and they can kind of keep everything in-house and potentially even branch out and have their own actual exchange in the future. So with everything that's going on at Square at the moment and how quickly they've moved on the Cash App stuff with cryptocurrency, I wouldn't be too surprised if we actually start seeing this as early as Q1, Q2 next year, which is pretty soon. You know, we're talking like 6 months' time. Overall, great news for crypto, great news for Square as well. We've seen the price has gone up dramatically as a result of this, and as a result, I've taken profit from several trades. But I will certainly be looking to keep some long-term exposure to Square because I really love what they're working on at the moment. Finally, AMD received a price target upgrade this week. Rosenblatt are the guys that gave the upgrade. They previously had a price target of $27. It's gone up to $30. I think actually it's a little bit high for, it's not something that we should really be expecting the price to be at within the next month or so. But I do think that it's very capable for very possible for AMD to hit that kind of high. In fact, I would even say that it can go higher than $30 with how they're currently performing and their current position within the market. In terms of CPUs, Ryzen is absolutely killing it. Intel have got a lot of problems. They've also got quite a few security vulnerabilities at the moment they're dealing with. And of course, Epic is really kind of taking the fight directly to Intel in the server market. And this is a market that AMD traditionally haven't ever really had a very strong foothold in. The last time they had a foothold was quite a while ago. So this is pretty big news for AMD, and it could definitely lead the price to go substantially higher than where it is. But I feel like the hype around this stock following their earnings call and then this upgrade, in combination with the kind of underwhelming performance we've seen from the new NVIDIA graphics cards has led the stock price to kind of rise a bit too high, I think. So although $30 plus is definitely something we should be looking at for next year, I think that this year, really, it's kind of unlikely to actually settle into that range. And anytime it hits that range, we should probably be taking advantage and taking some profits. So I've been trading accordingly, as you will see throughout the rest of this report. That leads me nicely onto our trading stats. So let's take a look. Portfolio change of plus 1.3%, a realized profit of minus 0.4%. Bear in mind that we had the EOS trades that closed, pushing our portfolio negative by around 4 or 5%. So that was very, very substantial on the realized profit side of things. A total of 62 trades were closed in total. 47 of them were profitable and 15 were unprofitable. Most of those, again, were the EOS positions. And finally, AMD was our most traded instrument this week, not EOS, which is surprising because there were, I think, 11 EOS positions which were closed. So it just goes to show how active I have been trading this week. So let's dig into the crypto stuff. We have one trade on Ethereum for 2.3% profit. It's really nothing to scream and shout about. Bitcoin, we have 3 trades closed for between 6.4% profit and 1.3% profit. These were all effectively just me kind of taking small profits and deciding to move more into altcoins because it really does seem like there is potential for this rally to kick off now. And if it does, I want to be slightly more away from Bitcoin and into the altcoins, especially EOS and IOTA. I also think that Dash is going to be potentially pretty strong during this rally as well. But I'll kind of talk about that when we get to those. So EOS, 14 trades were closed in total. Most of these trades, 12 of them, were closed by eToro. And this happened to everyone on the platform. I did explain this in the news section of last week's update because that was the day it happened, but this is the week that it has affected. So obviously I'm going to be talking about it here as well. So 12 positions were closed at a price of 508. They were reopened at 508. Not too much later by eToro. Luckily, I hadn't opened any other trades. I had noticed that something was wrong, and I didn't open any more trades until EOS had effectively reopened the positions for me. If you're one of the people that did get caught out by it, you should basically check how many units of EOS you have. If the number of units you have is identical to what you used to have, which you can check in your history and in your portfolio, then you really don't need to worry about what the opening price is or the closing price or anything. As long as the units are the same, you've effectively got the same amount of EOS, so it should break even at the same point that it used to. In terms of how this has affected my portfolio and the copies for you guys, I did express that there could be some issues for people who are copying with low amounts of money. I'm still kind of waiting for eToro to get back to me on that. I'm going to probably chase them again this week and see what's going on and make sure that everything's fine. Although I haven't seen too many people complaining, so I imagine that they must have fixed it for the majority of people. If you do still have problems, it's probably worth opening up a ticket. Looking at my trades in EOS, we have a 10% and a 5% profit trade, respectively, roughly. And again, I'm pretty happy with how EOS is progressing. There is really a lot going on. As you'll see in the what's coming up section at the end of the video, there's also a couple of big EOS events coming up soon. So overall, it's looking like an interesting time for EOS, and I really do think that it can break out soon against Bitcoin. We've already seen it kind of leading the rally for the altcoins. On to IOTA. So IOTA, 2 trades, 9.4% and 3.9% profit on each of these. IOTA has been a project that's been very, very controversial in the past. They've had a lot of pretty major problems, like really major problems. The network has been attacked multiple times from multiple attack vectors. They had problems with their wallets. They've been absolutely ridiculed by Bitcoin maximalists. It's a controversial cryptocurrency, but I still have a lot of faith in it as one of the biggest innovators, along with EOS, in cryptocurrency at the moment. It's also benefited very, very well during this recent small rally that we had. So IOTA and EOS were the 2 biggest gaining cryptos over this past week, out of the ones that are on eToro, obviously. So I'm pretty happy with how it's going there. I have started to try and build up a small position in IOTA to keep for the long term. I don't want to go too nuts with it because, as I said, I do think that IOTA is definitely a lot more risky than something like EOS. We're yet to really see very many real production ready products that have come out of IOTA, whereas EOS, we're already starting to see these little games and applications that are working right now that you can go and use, whereas IOTA is still a bit murky in terms of, if anything's actually finished or complete or working the way it should be working. And that leaves us with Dash. So I only did one trade in Dash this week, and it was a 4.7% loss even. This was a short position. It was only basically meant to be a day trade, and it moved against me. And I'm glad I closed it when I did, because Dash actually went quite a bit higher from where it was, and it could have ended us with a much nastier loss really for us. But overall, I'm still. A lot of people have been asking me recently, like, what are your thoughts on Dash? Are you still positive on Dash? I am still very positive on Dash. There was actually a report that came out last week as well about the future value of cryptocurrencies. This is like a 19-page long report. It's done a few rounds on eToro. I actually don't think the report is that good, but one of the cryptocurrencies that they looked at and that they thought had really good potential was Dash, and this is primarily because they think it's one of the strongest privacy currencies out there behind Monero. I personally think that it's pretty much on par with Monero, but I guess apples and oranges. So yeah, like Dash is still doing well. All these rumors that Dash is going to die and stuff, they're primarily coming from like Monero fans or hardcore Bitcoin fans. I still think Dash has got a lot to offer, and I think it's going to do very well next year when we are back into a bull market, hopefully. Next up, the stock recap. Square, 8 trades closed, which is quite a lot. It's one of my more actively traded this week. One of them was closed at plus 0.06%. Hey, every little helps. And the largest trade closed was a 22.1% profit. So as I said, I'm kind of trying to take some profit as we were going up during this recent bullish move in the NASDAQ. I still want to keep a very, very large position in Square for the long term because of everything that I talked about earlier. I really think that they've got very good plans for crypto. Their plans outside of crypto are really, really strong as well. I just think that they are a brilliant company and have a really, really bright future. So I still want to keep really high exposure, but at the same time, you have to kind of look at it sensibly and say, you know what, looking at the price right now compared to a couple of months ago, I think this is a pretty good time to be taking some profit. So that's what we've done. We do still have a few positions left open, and of course I will be trying to rebuy back in. I'll probably be looking at around the $80 kind of target for that. So I'm not trying to scalp too much profit off the top of this, but I do want to try and make something in the process rather than just kind of avoid the volatility, if you know what I mean. AMD, 10 long positions on AMD and 7 short positions. So the highest, the biggest gain we had was a 36.8% profit on an AMD position. We actually had several that were over 30%. We still have a few positions open in AMD, but I did close them all at one point. So we've been kind of trading this very, very actively and quite aggressively trading it because I was very, very confident in where the price should be. So again, as I mentioned earlier, the price shot up to $27. At that point, I was all over Twitter, all over Reddit, all over eToro saying, this is madness. There's no way it should be at this price right now. And I closed everything and shorted it. And I did very well out of those shorts, and I did very well out of the longs. And I pretty much timed this very, very well. I am absolutely buzzing about how well I managed to trade this. I'm very, very happy with it. So obviously I don't want to be too greedy. I need to know when to stop and when to kind of rebuild the position. And I think that's kind of the phase that I'm in now. Like, I've made some good money out of my trades here, my day trading. Definitely outperformed AMD itself. And I just need to kind of rebuild those positions again to make sure that we're ready to get back on board with AMD, because I do think it's going to go higher. That being said, it is going to be slightly less exposure than it was previously. I've made the mistake of overexposing to AMD in the past. I don't want to do that again. I do think that it could be a while until we really sort of see this shoot up again. It could be as early as next earnings. It could be next year. We just don't know. So I don't want to be building up loads of positions at anything above like $27. That's kind of madness. Onto Solar Edge. So you probably haven't seen Solar Edge or First Solar in these recaps very much, and that's because I'm basically just holding on to them for the most part. That being said, with the rally that happened this week, I did see an opportunity to sell it at a slightly lower loss than it has been recently. So I closed up one extra position in Solar Edge. I'm still kind of looking at both of these, and I would like to reduce my exposure a little bit because I think we still have potential for a big altcoin rally to come up soon. And there's still a lot of other companies that I would, quite like to have money in. And I just think that unfortunately we got caught out by this, but Solar Edge and First Solar are going to take a long time to recover, I think. I suspect we could be waiting the best part of a year before we're back up to all of those trades being in green on both those stocks. That's not to say that I think they're going to perform badly. I don't think we're likely to go any lower than where we are now, really, unless the overall market goes that direction. But I do want to kind of, try and put my money in the place where it's going to grow the quickest rather than just kind of keep it there. So we're trying to, strike a balance between the two and make sure that we've still got exposure and that we're still happy to kind of keep some there. It's good diversification for us. But at the same time, we have to look at where we're going to make money this year. Microsoft. So Microsoft, again, pretty much just taking profit here. The trades were open for some time and they basically benefited from the NASDAQ rally along with everything else. So it felt like a good excuse to take some profits and reinvest elsewhere. It pretty much just funded my AMD trades. Next up, we have Etsy. So Etsy was a 1.1% profit on just one trade. There really isn't much to say about this. There was no big motivation behind it. It was purely a technical trade, if I remember correctly. On to NVIDIA. So NVIDIA, I closed 3 trades here. 13.8% was the highest and 0.4% profit was the lowest. The reason that I got rid of these positions is basically a rebalancing ahead of what I think could be some reasonably tough months ahead for NVIDIA. Not for the overall company, but certainly for the graphics department. This is due to their new ray tracing graphics cards. So I've talked about this at quite some length over the past week or so, pretty much since it happened. The ray tracing technology is really, really good. But unfortunately, in order to kind of fit that into their new graphics cards, they have had to cut back on the raw power of those graphics cards for current generation games. And as a result, I expect to see some lackluster demand for these cards, especially given the hefty price tag that NVIDIA have put on top of these. Let's also not forget that NVIDIA were expecting much higher cryptocurrency graphics card sales, and they didn't really happen last quarter. So they've still got a bunch of 1080 series cards or 10 series cards that they need to shift. And in my opinion, we're much more likely to see the gamers go for those cards and hold off from this newer generation, since the gap between the two in terms of their performance on current generation games is so slim. That's not to say that the ray tracing stuff is a bad idea. I think that once it's kind of settled into the market and once we really see some AAA titles come out and actually use this stuff, we will certainly see those graphics cards do very, very well. And I think that actually this is an important move by NVIDIA to really kind of take charge of the market fully and potentially even just push AMD out of it entirely and just kind of push them back towards consoles and even potentially out of that as well. So it's an important move by NVIDIA, but I just think that we're going to have a reasonably weak 3, maybe 6 month period. So during that time, I want to, take a little bit of money off the table, take some profits, and go trade elsewhere with those funds. Next, we have Wix and Shopify. So these two stocks, which are actually quite similar in terms of what they do, they both actually moved very similarly over the course of the week, and I actually opened trades in both of them pretty much at the same time and closed them pretty much at the same time without really planning it or knowing it. So this is just kind of a coincidence that I thought was pretty funny, but both stocks I had a 2% gain and a 1% gain. Onto Activision Blizzard. So Activision, during their earnings call, there was a lot of concern by some of the investors and analysts about how they're being affected by the latest craze in battle royale games, and it kind of led me to believe that I think the sentiment on this stock and on actually quite a lot of gaming stocks at the moment is a little bit negative. So when it hit 1.3% profit on one of the two positions I have in Activision Blizzard, which has been at a loss for some time, just because the Nasdaq has been kind of pushing up, I took that opportunity to close, and it's lucky I did because there was then a small downgrade for Activision as well. But again, still looking at Activision as a good bet for the long term. Finally, the last trade, Alibaba. This was super quick, 2% day trade. There's really nothing else to say than that. It was purely based on the charts. It looked like a good time to buy, and I closed it, I think, within an hour or something. So just a nice little profit on the side, really. Performance. So as you can see, we did manage to close out August in the green eventually, plus 4.43% portfolio change overall. Last week's portfolio change was plus 1.3%, and we've started September, on a slightly bad note. Not that there's really much to include there because it's been September for about a day at this point, so there's really no data to go off. From a realized trading perspective, you can see that we still closed August minus 3.52%. And I pretty much put all of that down to those EOS positions being closed and effectively realized as a result. Had that not happened, I think we would actually be in the green by 2 or 3% potentially, as much as 2 or 3% in August. And, there's not really much I can do about that. I think, as you can see from the week 35, I did a pretty good job at kind of taking those losses and consuming them with some of my better trades in AMD and Square. So only minus 0.4% for week 35 in total. And again, I think it's primarily AMD and Square that are to thank for that. We've also, of course, had the overall bull market for the Nasdaq over the past week. So pretty much, there's a lot of those other trades, as you just saw, that I closed across the board, which really did help us out in terms of trying to recover some of that loss that we were hit with. That being said, of course, as I mentioned earlier, eventually this EOS stuff will rebalance. We will close these positions, and when we do, there will be much bigger realized profits. So it's not all bad news. Looking ahead, so there's basically not too much to talk about at the moment, but certainly London is going to be having a pretty busy week in terms of crypto. So London has a lot of crypto meetups at the best of times. I attend a reasonable number of them, semi-regularly. And this month we have some really pretty substantial ones. So World Blockchain Forum, which is a really big event. The tickets for this are very expensive, around about £1,000 a ticket. Last year it was even more expensive for the tickets, I think. After that, there is, so that's taking place right now as I'm recording this video. I did see someone that actually had a ticket and asked me if I'm going, but unfortunately I am not. Blockchain Live is also coming up, so that's towards the end of the month. Blockchain Live I went to last year, and it's actually the event that really swayed me on EOS. It's the event where I met Dan Larimer face-to-face. I actually had a conversation with him about a few things, about how EOS worked, and honestly, it was a really good event. Even aside from the EOS stuff, there was some really good content there. So I'm looking forward to going to that again, and I will be going to that this year, as will Matt from eToro. So if you're going to that, come and say hi. And the last event I kind of wanted to touch on was the third global hackathon for EOS. So they held one in Hong Kong, they held one in Sydney, and now they're doing London. After that, they have one more, which I think is in California somewhere, and then they have a finals. And basically, this is just a big event where a bunch of developers and people that are working on apps meet up and try and code as much of it as they can in a very short period without much sleep, and see what they can build, really. And there's a lot of big movers and shakers from EOS that are likely to be there. So I'm going to head down and see what it's all about, hopefully. I haven't confirmed for that one yet, though, so don't go buying tickets or anything just because you want to see me. Not that I think I have that many fans. That's basically it in terms of what we're looking forward to at the moment. Obviously, there will be other things that come up, but for the most part, I think we're kind of in a chill out period, hoping that the Nasdaq is going to cool off a little bit, because if it doesn't, we could see some major downturns again, like we saw in January and February after these kind of movements. But we'll see where it goes, and hopefully it can flatten out and we can kind of hold on to these gains and move forward into a green month. That's all from me, guys. Again, you can follow me on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and of course on eToro. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next week.